So Godard, I've kind of stole your thunder there and said so much about you, but maybe you could tell us just a little bit about yourself and how you came to think about creating G2.
Oh, and thank you for the kind intro, Stephen. Good to be here with you.
Thank you.
And I think you already mentioned it, I have been building SaaS companies for a long time, 25 years. So I think now I'm an old entrepreneur. When I started my first company in 2000, I think I was, now I'm doing the math, but I think I was like 28, 29 years old. Now I'm over 50, but still doing it. So, and I still love it. But, and G2 was really inspired by those experiences because when we were building, especially our first company, Big Machines, it took us a long time. And some of you may have, I talked about it yesterday, but it was a very long struggle. You know, where I think it took us 7 years to find product market fit.
Wow.
And obviously, eventually we got a good exit, but I think it was 13 years start to finish till Oracle acquired the company. So it was a very long struggle. Yeah. And partly, I thought what made it so hard, it was very hard for software buyers. And at Big Machines, we serve big global manufacturers. And eventually, companies like GE Energy for their huge turbines, they made really big machines, or Rolls-Royce Energy also for their big turbines. I remember those customers would find us and they would say, wow, we wish we'd found you 3 years ago. We didn't know you existed. And we thought that was because there was no consumer-like shopping site where you could easily discover the best SaaS app. And when we started G2 over 10 years ago, we thought that problem for the buyer would only get worse because there has been so much innovation, and that's what we anticipated. Now there's over 100,000 SaaS apps on G2. Yeah. And so that's challenging for the buyer, and obviously also challenging. Most of you are probably software sellers, SaaS leaders, SaaS entrepreneurs, but how do you break through all that noise, right? How do the buyer and the seller connect at the right time? When you have the perfect app to solve their business problem, how do they discover you? And then how do you obviously, if you have that perfect fit, how do you easily sell them? So that's kind of what we set out to solve at G2, a more consumer-like shopping experience. And obviously reviews, we thought, record a consumer shopping. And that's the other thing we noticed, there was no review site for SaaS, and so that's what we set out to build, and I think what we're still building today.
Now, one of the popular parts of G2 would be looking at grids for each category. Certainly the categories where there's enough reviews and enough products to make it meaningful. If people are not familiar with G2's grid, I think most of you would be, but if you're not, they're similar to the Magic Quadrant from Gartner. However, even though they look alike, they're different beasts fed on different types of data. One of them has a lot less fillers. Tell us a little bit of why a G2 grid is a distinct evolution from the Magic Quadrant from Gartner.
Right. And I think they are like a similar visual, because I think it's a good visual. But I think ours is based on real-time user feedback and real-time data. And I think the traditional Gartner model, they hire an analyst who does primary research. And I remember when I was a vendor at Big Machines, we would send them, they would say, hey, I'm going to publish a new quadrant in a year. And then you would send them like a 20-tab spreadsheet, with all the information on your company. And then one analyst would crunch all that data. They would have more meetings with you, watch demos, talk to your customers. But the whole process would take about a year, which I thought even by the time they published it, tended to be a year old because it was based on older data. And then they would only update it every 2 years. So I thought it was very dated. And also because they were relying on a human analyst, they had to hire an analyst for every category. I think they still only today have about 200. And the idea with G2 was let's do it based on real-time data. Let's do it based on the crowd, which made it, we thought, much more scalable. And also, we don't have to exclude vendors because now if you're a startup, once you have 10 customer reviews, you can automatically be one of our grids. Whereas with Gartner, they have exclusion criteria, like you have to have 25 million in enterprise revenue, you have to have 50 enterprise customers. And I understand why they do it, because that analyst can't talk, like in a lot of our categories, like AI writing assistants now has 600 different products, which is great, right? But obviously with an analyst model, you can't cover 600 products. They would probably only put 10 to 15 dots. So it's just a different, more inclusive, more real-time model.
Yeah, it leaves them years behind the curve at this stage with the way things
so.
Update on a daily basis these days. So it's a
true,
it's
and
a
the
different
speed
world.
of categories, right? Because now we have like over 40 AI software categories. And I think when ChatGPT 3.5 came out 2 years ago, we only had probably 5. Wow. And that's the cool thing about software. part of our industry is always growing and inventing new categories and new things, and we like to stay in front of that.
Now, Goddard, the software reviews that you get, there's a lot of granularity and structure to them. And when you get enough of them and you fill up, it gets a meaningful G2 score. One thing I noticed on the side is you have a popularity element to that and a satisfaction element to that. Could you tell me, how are you using that to make the G2 number up when you're rating software, which is an extension of a vendor, really, in some ways?
Right. And the satisfaction score is entirely based on the reviews we capture.
Okay.
And that satisfaction score is based, obviously, on the quality of the reviews, the ratings, as well as the recency.
Yep.
And we do weight more recent reviews more because all these software apps are always evolving. And obviously what you want as a buyer, you want the review based on the most recent version. And I know a lot of startups here are very innovative, so you might be pushing new code every day even.
Yeah.
And so, but it's review quantity, quality, and recency. That's the horizontal axis. And then the vertical axis we call it market presence. And but we're trying to estimate, yes, how much market share does this product have? And most buyers also want to know that. Some more conservative buyers will only want to buy the product that's already very well established.
Yeah.
Probably maybe your large enterprises. And then others are like, because that's kind of our up and to the right leaders quadrant. That tends to be people with a lot of market share and very high satisfaction. And then the lower right is probably where a lot of SaaS startups will start, where like, hey, you have very high satisfaction. You might not yet have a lot of market share. And obviously a lot of buyers are also, and I think as a startup entrepreneur, you need to find those innovators that actually want the innovative, the up and coming tech. And so that's what the market presence does. It tries to estimate, how much market share does this vendor have in this category.
Very good. Yep. Now you have a rising tide of data. Right now the website is eminently navigable. I've used it for years. But you've got 2,100 categories and increasing. You have 180,000 products, 150,000 vendors, 2.85 million reviews, which breaks down into tens of millions of data points. Given all of that, is there a lot of attention being focused internally in G2 on how you feel people are going to actually navigate the site going forward?
And yeah, I think it can be overwhelming for software buyers. And probably also a lot of you hear that when you're talking to prospective customers, right? There is so much software out there now in the world. Yeah. And also on G2, I think there's over 2,000 categories. And sometimes I say it could be like a supermarket with 2,000 aisles. Probably wouldn't be very fun shopping there because you don't know what aisle to go to. And we are trying to solve that with AI, and our AI Monty in particular, to be more of a guide. And the beauty thing about generative AI, it's actually really good at, we have over 3 million reviews. It's really good at digesting all that text, understanding what business problems are users solving with what software. And now, so as a business buyer, as a software buyer, you can just say, hey, I'm trying to increase the accuracy of my sales forecasting, let's say, or I'm trying to optimize my marketing spend efficiency. Yeah. And then Monty can ask more questions, and including, I'll encourage you to sign up with LinkedIn. And then we also have the context on what industry is your company in, what's your company size, where are you based, yeah, which is all relevant to the software recommendation.
And that's a mix of your own first-party data and third-party data you can easily pull in from LinkedIn for employee numbers and from other sites as well. That's the power. You're mixing those for that, right?
True. That, obviously a lot of third-party data, and like I said, if somebody signs up with their LinkedIn, we have all their professional context. And then we can ask them more questions about their use case. If you're having sales forecasting challenges, well, what kind of sales do you do? Are you B2B? Are you B2C? And then based on that and based on the reviews we already have, we can start to recommend, hey, here's the right category, here's the right solutions for you to consider. And the beauty of Monty, ideally Monty is like a very smart, if it's sales forecasting software, it might be like the smartest Accenture CRM consultant that really understands sales forecasting. Yeah. But now you can have it all through an AI chat, and they can advise you. And so I think it's a very, and not just for G2, but any website that has a lot of information that can be overwhelming, I think AI can be a really nice interface to guide you to the right information and the right products.
And also, you guys have a lot of data on subscription dates. So let's imagine I'm the CMO of a company, and my Marketo, no offense to Marketo, it's a good product, but Marketo is about to expire, and I'm looking for whatever reason to change, I'm looking for options. When I go into G2, do you know I'm there? And can you meet me with the right person?
Obviously, it depends, because you may be shopping anonymously, then no. But obviously, we also see a lot of people that would put in a search query like Marketo alternatives, Marketo competitors.
Okay.
And or if you've signed up with G2, and obviously it's up to you how much you share, but if we do have obviously more of your subscription info, then we could be more proactive. And I do think, again, with AI, obviously the more data, the more context we have on that person that's shopping and their existing tech stack, then the better we can advise them. But it's kind of a give-get, like in terms of how much they want to disclose to us. But obviously the more data we have on them, the more precise we can make the recommendations.
Very good. Now, I'd like to know more about Monty, given that this year has been the year of AI, and because you've so much structured first-party data, he has different personas. He's an expert, he's a recommender, he's a support person, and even I think there's an SDR in beta. How can Monty be all of those things? Does he exist in different places? Does it depend on who's logging in? How does that work?
It depends on the persona of the user. And so it starts with a buyer Monty, which I mentioned helps the software buyer navigate G2, find the right categories, the right products to consider, kind of build a short list. And then, we also have a seller Monty, which is more like an AI SDR, which a vendor on G2 can train, let's say on their sales FAQs. And it's usually like as a shopper, right, at first you start looking across the site in a category, but then once you're looking at a particular product and you're like, wow, this one could be interesting, you might have specific questions, like what's the implementation, time frame, we might have questions about pricing, integrations, usually where you would have to set up a call with the vendor, but now I think you can have a virtual conversation with an AI SDR that's been trained by the vendor that can answer all those questions, walk you further down the funnel. Yeah. And we are actually seeing what's really promising is there's about a 30% conversion from that seller Monty to either a lead, a demo request, wow, or even, let's say, a starter edition or a trial sign up.
That's huge.
And so we do see it being very effective. And I think it's something, and we build on top of ChatGPT, and obviously they have great developer APIs, so we're obviously leveraging the core LLM technology that OpenAI developed. But then we're able to quickly train it. And we've also figured out what's the best way to train it on your sales content. Uh-huh. And it's also a bit of an art form where you actually, I think any AI training, you don't want to train it on too much data, but kind of just the right amount. And obviously that all has to be very clean data. And then it's amazing how quickly these AI chatbots can get really smart.
And that's going to live sometimes anyway on the website of the vendor.
It could. Obviously, it's up to you. Like, you can train it just on your G2 profile, but then we have had some vendors say, wow, this is working so well on my G2 profile. Could I also put it on my website? Okay. So now we also make that available. And obviously, there's a lot of AI SDRs and great tools, obviously, like Intercom. You could enable it through that. But we do think one unique advantage of G2 we have millions of buyers coming, and so we have thousands of vendors we're serving. And I think the key with AI is, like, do you have the most training data on that use case? Yeah. And so we do think, and it's very early, but we think, we certainly believe in, we want to have the best kind of software buying advisor agent, if you will, but we think we can also have a very good seller agent, based on all the training we're doing for different vendors.
Now, when I think about Monty or indeed chatbots with Intercom, another excellent company, when I think about them taking your hand and walking and talking and guiding you and listening to you in a kind of a Socratic intercourse, a Socratic conversation, which I know you've spoken about before. The problem is getting them to take your hand in the first place. So do you think, at the moment, the way we search for things most of the time is Google. And for a lot of tech literate people here, they don't even go to the company website. They put what they're looking for. Like, I don't look for people in LinkedIn. I put the name plus the term LinkedIn into Google because it's far, far more effective. Given that we've been trained to kind of think that way, but yet the Socratic conversation, that kind of querying as a way to learn, it's more human and probably more effective. How do you see that going? Is that the big elephant in the room, adoption, big-time adoption?
Yes, and I think, and most of us, the last 25 years of the internet, ever since Google launched in 1999, right, we've all learned to use search. And I think you're right. Usually, it's actually true on G2, sadly, but the insight search on G2 is probably not as good as Google, like you said with LinkedIn, right? So if I want to find a G2 profile, I'll do the same thing sometimes, like Intercom. They have great reviews on G2. I might type Intercom G2 versus going to our G2 search. So I think we've all been trained to do that, and Google has been the best search, the best way to discover things. But obviously now it's shifting, and even I'm trying to train myself. Now on my browser, I have like tabs for ChatGPT, Anthropic, Gemini, and I'm often trying all three because I'm trying to learn. But I'm also like, rather than going to Google, I'll start an LLM because I want to know how this new paradigm works.
Absolutely.
And sometimes I think obviously the advantage is rather than doing 10 search, you having to synthesize all the information yourself. The LLM attempts to do that for you, and Google even now has that AI search box at the top, right? So I think it's an interesting shift now. And I think we're still seeing the majority of buyers still use the search paradigm. But I do think, and I think people are saying this internet-wide, SEO traffic is down. And also I think Yamini from HubSpot, their CEO, she just spoke about this at the Inbound conference. And they're expecting total search volumes to go down, let's say 25%.
That's interesting.
Over the next couple of years. And that also presents challenges for all marketers and also sites like G2, because historically we've relied on SEO to drive most of our traffic. And so it's a shifting paradigm. And so what we're also aiming to prove is, can we be the biggest influencer of the LLM? Because even ChatGPT, right, it's not smarter than its own. It just trains on, really originally it was trained on all the internet's data, and maybe we didn't even all realize that it was training on all our data, but it was. Now we all know. And there's also interesting startups, like one in the US called Profound, that's trying to, for brands, figure out why is ChatGPT recommending certain products? And they start with consumer brands, like you can ask, like what's the best cheeseburger in New York? And obviously brands like, let's say McDonald's, Wendy's, they're very interested in, first of all, what's ChatGPT gonna recommend? That's very interesting, right? And is my brand being recommended first, second, third? And then secondly, of course, why, right? And what websites, what data are feeding the LLM? And so I think it's gonna be an interesting new era. It's gonna be kind of the new SEO optimization, right? It's gonna be more like LLM optimization. But then how do you prove your influence on these LLMs? And then to what extent do they provide attribution? I think some of them are, right, where they'll give you like, hey, here's the top 3 sites we use to train this answer. But it's all in, I think, an interesting new world.
It's like the mobile app problem, the attribution side of that.
True. That was like when mobile apps first came out, right? People also, and it was harder to measure, like mobile app influence versus web browser, mobile browser influence. And so I do think it's a whole new kind of attribution challenge for G2. And I think for us, it's a massive threat and an opportunity. And frankly, for the old internet, right? Is everyone going to only use ChatGPT and Gemini and not go to any websites anymore? I mean, that's possible. And then also, how much better does your agent, and we're trying to build a software buying agent, how much better does our agent, the G2 Monty agent, have to be than just a ChatGPT? And I think these are all interesting questions that I certainly don't. I think most of the internet, most of the world, right, even with SaaS software, like, are we still gonna have traditional like workflows? And I think Intercom founder Des also said this, right? Like, I think with AI, maybe the software just works for us, but even like a CRM system traditionally, and you and I both worked at Salesforce, and the traditional CRM paradigm is like, you have to go into Salesforce, fill in so many required fields on the opportunity, the contact, the account. Yeah. But are we gonna have to do that, right? And the upside of the AI is like, it'll just read our emails, listen to our conversations, fill in the CRM for us, fill in our sales forecast for us, but are we still, as a user, even logging into a CRM system? Or are we just doing our work and the AI behind the scenes is feeding the machine? But it could totally also change all SaaS, right? And I think for all of us, it's a massive opportunity and a massive threat. And it'll be exciting in our industry to see, how does it shake out in the next 5 to 10 years.
Now, just to bring the level of intellect down, just for a bit of fun, when I was researching the interview with you, of course I know you quite well, but I came across the Monty Hall problem, and I thought, is that where that came from? The Monty Hall problem, of course, is it's from a game show in the States where there's 3 doors, there's two goats behind 2 of the doors and a car behind the other. But I actually read a white paper published this year, and what happens is you pick a door, they don't tell you what's behind it, but then the presenter opens another door. It's always one with a goat in it. And the question is, should you change or should you stick? If you're mathematical, you'll know that you should always change. But is there any chance that that Monty comes from the Monty Hall problem?
No, although
Okay.
that would be a cool story, because it's also kind of a probabilistic story.
In the white paper, G2 is actually the second door, represents the second door opened on the Monty Hall problem. It's just amazing. Did you know there's also an indie group called the Monty Hall Problem that have played in the G2, the Glasgow Garage?
Wow.
Just, okay, crazy stuff. But
Crazy coincidences.
So, how do you see the future of buying and selling online, Godard?
And maybe just to complete why Monty.
Go on.
Maybe you're going to ask, but it actually comes from our co-founder, Mark. He was our design co-founder, and he came up with the company mascot, which was a mongoose. And for whatever reason, he called it Monty, so it was kind of our company mascot. And then when AI came out, we're like, oh, what do we call our AI agent? And we're like, oh, Monty, our mascot, has become sentient with AI. And so we decided to call our AI agent Monty.
Cool. And he's very non-threatening looking and inviting. Was that thought through, all of that?
True, like Monty at the beginning, and we've changed the design of Monty, but he was like a very silly, almost too silly, like the original design of our Monty mascot. He looked kind of crazy. But the idea, it's like a silly, fun creature that, to be, kind of your friend, to advise you on complex topics like SaaS software and AI, but like hopefully in a friendly, approachable way.
Okay. Will he look a bit different when he's the SDR, sitting on the vendor's website?
We do have slightly different, and we're experimenting with that, different colors, different designs. And frankly, you can rebrand Monty if you put, and we have, I think Intercom calls their agent Finn.
Yes.
But people do rebrand Monty, and you actually can. That's like a feature. You can put your own mascot, your own brand on it.
Very good.
Which most vendors want to do because you want to add your own, your company's own personality into your own AI agent.
Yeah. So I guess the big question, well, actually, just before I ask that, I think it's an inevitable paradigm. I have a feeling you do too, that we will move towards this conversational interaction when we're seeking out information of any form. But for example, in the case of Monty, it's good. It seems like the right place and the right time. But do you feel the companies that are setting out to be pioneers in this, I think G2 might be one of them, do you think they'll still need to give it a nudge if they're going to make it in a reasonable period of time? In other words, are you going to spend time in educating the market on Monty and on working on getting users to adopt him early and see how he works and all of that? It is a male, by the way, Monty.
For sure. And I think also, you also see it on their websites like LinkedIn. They're kind of embedding AI prompts. And so we're trying the same thing. If you're reading a review, maybe there's a prompt, hey, would you like a summary of all the reviews? So there's different AI prompts we're trying to put in the UX in natural places. And so I think to encourage people to try it, because even for myself, I still have to remind myself, I always want to go to Google search, but now I kind of force myself to go to an LLM partly because I want to learn, and I think it's the future. So I think there's still a shift in user behavior that we are attempting to encourage. And you're right, it's also so we get more data, because the beauty of all our Monty AI chats, we actually use AI to synthesize them and watch them. And so then we can learn quicker. And obviously it has to be useful. And obviously worst case, we learn, wow, if we send people to an AI chat, they're less likely to engage, right? So then we have to recalibrate. But I think right now we're trying to encourage it and then learn faster so we can create a better AI experience. And I do agree with you. I think kind of the Socratic method, all the way back to Socrates, Greek philosophers, right? I think it's the most natural way for humans to learn.
In Athens, yeah.
Yes, is through a Q&A dialogue. And so I think that's why ChatGPT 3.5 was so popular, because it was that, right? It's just a very natural conversation with hopefully an AI expert. So I do think it's the interface of the future, and so we're aiming to, really make ours. I think the key is to make it as useful as possible for the software buyer and seller, and keep making it better, faster than everyone else, because I think right now is a massive arms race. Everyone's investing in AI.
And speaking of Socrates, just the way Monty is inspired by real reviews and by others, of course Plato wrote everything that we read that Socrates said, Plato observed him and wrote. Just to tie it up, where do you think the future of buying and selling online is going, let's say in the next 5 years? Where would you envision G2? What role will it play in that, do you think, in buying and selling software and recommending and educating people on software? Where would you see that?
And I think the general trend, and we're doing buyer surveys at G2, like every 6 months we survey at least 1,000 enterprise buyers. And I think one trend that's already been happening is towards self-serve. And I think we've all seen that, right? And one of our fastest growing categories is also demo automation. I think you also used to be a sales engineer. But like most people now, before they have scheduled a meeting with the sales rep, the BDR, and eventually the sales engineer, they want to have a self-service demo that's pre-configured for them.
Yeah.
So I think more buyers want to do more and more self-discovery, learn more, have a personalized demo, before they'll talk to sales. So I do think that trend towards self-service is going to continue, and I think AI is going to accelerate it. And if you said in 5 years, I think most buyers will start in an LLM, right? Whether it's ChatGPT, Gemini, or some future startup yet to be invented. Because that was like Google was not the first search engine. I think they were actually like 5 years late. When they came out in 1999, there were already like 100 search engines, so maybe the...
First mover curse.
Yeah, maybe the LLM of choice in 5 years hasn't been invented yet, But I do think it'll be buyers will start, not just for software, probably for anything, right? They'll start in some kind of a generative AI chat assistant that will start and then guide them. And obviously for G2 to be relevant, we have to make sure that, hopefully our data is most trusted, and whatever LLM interface that is will rely on our data the most when they're advising software buyers.
Okay, great. Just before I let you go, Goddard, could I field 1 or 2 questions with the audience? We're running slightly over, but the next talk is the last one, and I think that will probably run slightly over too, so I think it would be okay. Have we got 1 or 2 questions from the audience? Anybody? I'm as blind as a bat, so put your hand up high if you're going to ask a question. Or just pipe up. Anybody? Aha, yes.
Hiya. Is
Hiya.
a chatbot, is that really what, is that necessarily the best way to see all the things that are on offer to you? And you've got to put a lot of trust into it, right? And how do you have that faith that the chatbot is going to do your thinking for you?
I mean, it's a good question. But in some ways, I think it's also like, somehow we trusted that Google search is going to present the 3 to 10 most relevant results. And I think we all grew to trust it, right? Where I usually wouldn't go beyond the first 10 results on Google. I trusted that their algorithm was surfacing the best content. So I do think we have to make it trusted. And one other thought I had is like, obviously it doesn't necessarily have to be a chatbot interface, like I think AI is also very good with voice, video, avatar. Maybe it's a brain chip implant from Elon. I don't know. But I do think, and we have to make it trusted, right? But I do think the most trusted one will also win. And I generally think that happened in search. I do think Google presented the best results, the most relevant results. So I think the same thing will happen in LLMs, right? Ultimately the LLM interface, and whether it's chat, voice, however we interact with it, like I think the most trusted one I do think will win and get the most adoption.
Godard Abel, co-founder, CEO of G2, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Stephen.
Absolute pleasure.